Well, thanks very much, Alicia. Well, good evening and welcome to this evening's episode of our occasional series, The State of Our Nation. Well, from its inaugural session in 1994, the powers, role, and real influence of the Pan-African Parliament have always been a moot point. At present, the Parliament only has advisory and consultative powers, while waiting for the continent's 54 member states to give it real teeth. Now, notwithstanding the dragging of feet in granting it real powers, the Johannesburg-based Parliament kicked off another session on Monday, beginning with the swearing in of new members and yesterday holding another debate on the legislature's own powers or lack of. Today, things moved up a gear. In what got some of the MPs hot under the collar, the Parliament started debating the first of several hardcore issues that may just pit MP against MP and region against region, and of course the continent's powerhouses against one another. A Burundi MP, who also happens to be a brother to that country's president, found himself in a bit of an awkward position as members of the Pan-African Parliament made no secret of their dissatisfaction with his brother's conduct. South Africa, too, came under fire for the handling of the xenophobic attacks, with a Nigerian MP grabbing the opportunity to hit out at the host country. Now, before we bring you frank interviews with some of the MPs who caught our attention, and to give you some context to later discussions, here are some highlights from what started out as a debate on peace and security in Africa.
The situation in Burundi represents for the Peace and Security Council and the African Union in general a serious source of concern, and we're committed to enable the country to return to the path of dialogue in view of the organization of consensual elections and a total return to peace, working in close cooperation with the countries of the region through the East African Community and with the support of the international community, in particularly the United Nations. The African Union is pursuing its efforts to preserve peace, security and stability in Burundi within the framework of the Arusha Agreement.
In the north of Mali and in the Sahel region in general, in the Great Lakes region, where the LLA is still active, in Somalia, the menace has yet become more complex, due mainly to growing interpretation between political, religious, and ideological extremists, organized transnational criminality under various platforms and terrorist groups. It is a known fact that the terrorist group play around the border, which they at times aimed at transforming to an asset. From there on, there is no alternative to cooperation and concerted action jointly or collectively to come to terms with the menace.
Honourable members, among all these major crises, let me highlight the following. The situation in Somalia. In Somalia, AMISOM and the Somali National Army have successfully conducted joint operations under the codename Eagle and Indian Ocean, which resulted in the recapturing of vast areas from the Al-Shabaab terrorist group that is seeking to extend its activities in other countries in the Horn of Africa, in particular Kenya. Over 80% of the southern central of Somalia is now under control of the federal government of Somalia. A positive trend, nevertheless, is that the political developments remain encouraging, marked especially by significant progress in the area of state building, constitutional review, and the preparations for the elections in 2016. In Mali, the inclusive peace talks between the government and the armed movements, spearheaded by the Algerian mediation, with the support of the countries of the region in collaboration with the African Union, the United Nations, ECOWAS, the European Union, and the Organization for Islamic Cooperation enabled the conclusion of the Peace and Reconciliation Agreement in Mali, initialed in Algiers on the 1st of May 2015 and signed in Bamako on 15 May 2015 by the government and movements of the Algiers platform.
The political and security situation in South Sudan is still extremely difficult for our union. Quite a number of ceasefire violations have been recorded by IGAD. The humanitarian situation remains very difficult, with more of 1 million people displaced owing to violence, and quite 4 million people needing assistance. Let me state once again on this floor the disappointment of our Council about the inability of leaders of South Sudan to come together in spite of the concerned effort of the IGAD. We endorse the mediation process as laid down by the IGAD countries with the support of partners, including the United Nations, on ways and means of accelerating the search for a durable solution to the conflict.
Amina Jibo Diallo is, of course, the chairperson of the African Union's Peace and Security Council. Well, apart from the conflict, Ms. Diallo also said that poverty and equality have actually compounded the instability on the continent.
Another challenge comes in form of managing the cycle of conflict. Outside the response to the causes of the conflict, poverty, bad governance, identical protest, radicalization, extremists, we must invest at the level of operation for the maintenance of peace, focusing on reconstruction and consolidation of post-conflict peace. These procedures must be inscribed on the long term with emphasis on consolidation of political, economic, and security institution commitment, on the policy of disarmament, demobilization, reintegration, and the constitution of a rule of law, founded notably on principle of citizenship and gender equality. Beyond the current situation of conflict and crisis, our continent continues to be confronted with an increasing situation of the scourge of terrorism, of violent extremism and transnational criminality, as well as human trafficking, with a flourishing in a context of hopeless people looking for a future with better opportunities. These conflicts are asymmetric and of a non-conventional nature, as terrorists who are criminals and traffickers choose to visit violence on civilians as a weapon of war. They have access to very important financial resources, sophisticated war arsenal, and pure natural resources to their advantage with impunity. The shameful attack, the unleashed kidnapping, and other acts of violence perpetrated by Boko Haram against the civil society, especially women and children in northern Nigeria and in the bordering towns with other countries of the region, the killing of young students at Garissa in Kenya, the beheading of African citizens by the spear for Daesh, i.e., reinforce the idea that terrorism remains the worst menace confronting Africa on the way to promote peace, security, and stability on the continent.
Well, it was during the debate of her report, the chairperson of the African Union Peace and Security Council, that MPs took aim at the AU for failing to take action to end conflict in Africa.
For me, the prime factor that we have failed entirely to address is the unity of the African continent. We talk of individual countries, individual ideas, yes, but do we have the one voice, the one Africa, and the one government to address those issues? When some of us were young, In 1964, they said 50 years from now, Africa will be like Europe. Where are we today? Do we come close to Europe or even China? Sierra Leone was far better than China in 1964. Today we are beggars from China. We talk of development. Where is development? No education, science and technology. We are now going backward in terms of technology. The West, the East are far advancing. Talk of Ebola, we had to beg from China. Thanks to God, Uganda came in, Kenya came in, South Africa came in, and other neighboring countries helped. But Cuba came in and supported us than any other country in the world. Where is the political will of the African people? We talk every time, we write every time. 54 heads of state can unite Africa, but everybody wants to be a head of state.
Madam Vice President, we need to reject and at the same time condemn any attempt of coup d'etats within our African continent without taking into account the reasons behind such coups, because it is resorting to weapons, to arms as a solution to problems should be over. As it happens, as it is the case in Europe and developed countries, I would suggest that our Pan-African Parliament be further involved in prevention, conflict prevention, beyond our inquiry missions during the conflict situations.
Just two things that I want to talk to. I see that there's a mention of Boko Haram issue here, even though briefly. I wish you had given us more insight as to how far the fight against Boko Haram, which is one of the biggest insurgency facing us in Africa today. If you had talked a bit about the need for cooperation among countries, the need to share more information. As you can tell, in recent months, the successes that have been recorded. Boko Haram clearly is not a Nigerian issue. Yes, you clearly got it right that it's an asymmetric war, and this kind of terrorism is around border regions of nations. And so now you see it has eaten into Niger, it's eaten into Cameroon, it's eaten into Chad, which is maybe awoken the governments of these states to come together and share information. And I need not tell you how much successes in the last few weeks have been recorded. Happily, Honorable Usman alluded to it, even as recent as yesterday, heads of governments of the ECOWAS got together to re-emphasize the need for cooperation and sharing of intelligence. Secondly, and lastly for me, it's the issue of xenophobic attacks in South Africa. I know that the foreign minister, when he spoke, had made allusions to this. I know that the MPs here have mentioned it. But we cannot overemphasize the need to condemn these xenophobic attacks. As I was coming in this morning, my mission here, the Nigerian mission, was briefing me that xenophobic attacks continue up till this moment. There is an operation being carried out by the police and the military called Operation Fielo. Mr. President, very importantly, 10 more seconds, Operation Fielo. And this is a continuation of this xenophobic attack. We are all Africans. We are all supposed to be our brothers' keepers. I mean, there are protocols to follow if you think things are not going well, if you think there are people who are occupying your country illegally. But xenophobic attacks cannot be the way, and it must be condemned in strongest terms. Thank you.
Well, I did have an opportunity to speak to that last speaker, Senator about his address, especially on his assertions that South Africa had in fact failed to deal with xenophobia. And here's how our conversation went. Senator Usman, thank you very much for talking to us. Quite an interesting conversation that you raised earlier on what South Africa is doing. Is that for you a sore point, how South Africa has dealt with the xenophobia issues over the past couple of months?
Yes, indeed it is. It's been a sore point, not only for me, I guess. It's been a sore point for every African, particularly, and every member of the human race. This shouldn't be, and particularly given that a few years ago we had the same situation, and we thought lessons were learned from it, and unfortunately not enough lessons, and you just can't condemn this enough. You can't. People, it's a way of life. In today's world, it's a way of life. It's a global world. You need people with skills moving around, between territories, legally. And where that is not legally acceptable, there must be a process, a procedure that is acceptable as a standard to address such situation.
Where do you think lies the problem? Who's not doing their job?
Tell you what, I cannot condemn this enough. I, as a member of the Nigerian leadership, Nigerian government, cannot condemn this enough. I, as a member of the African Parliament, cannot condemn this enough. However, it is not in my place to tell you what it is you're not doing. But certainly, people aren't being held accountable. The xenophobic attack, the recent one, started because somebody high up in the society, in the South African society, brought up the issue of migrants coming over to take jobs. And the next thing we knew, riots, xenophobic attacks on the streets. This is months later. Nobody has been brought to book. Nobody of that high standing. Nobody has been brought to book, and we demand, and we still demand, that must be done. That is a place to start.
Now, there are people who say, look, yes, South Africa has admitted that there is a problem, and it has done everything in its power that could be done in the period that was available to try and deal with this situation. Most countries, in fact, almost everyone, is happy, and they have been satisfied also with the explanations that South Africa has given and what it is actually doing to address the problem. But you seem to be clinging on to your narrative, and you seem not to accept that South Africa is indeed doing something about the problem. And why is that? Because I represent a people, and I am in constant touch with those people. Today, as I speak with you, 20th May, 2015, this morning I had a briefing that xenophobia is continuing in another form. The South African police and the South African military is conducting an operation nicknamed Operation Fielo. And that operation is targeting migrants still. People are living in fear in their homes. Their doors are knocked down at 2 a.m. in the morning. People are taken away from their homes, and their families don't know where they've been taken to. But have you raised it with the authorities, haven't you?
This was just brought to my knowledge this morning, and yes, as a matter of fact, I raised it in the Parliament of Africa, on the floor of the Parliament. Listen to me. I'm not, South Africa is part of the Committee of the African Nation. South Africa is my brother. You don't understand, do you? Every Nigerian felt every pain you felt, every valley that you went through, we went through it with you. In your darkest time, in your darkest hour, we were there. And for it to be said, and this is indeed every African, this is how every African feels, because every African was there in the time in the fight against apartheid.
I don't think anybody disputes that. Everyone has said that, and South Africa has accepted that. But what is the problem now is that Nigeria seems not to accept what everybody else seems to be keen to accept, which then people have related to a rivalry that has been going on between the two countries as to who's big, or mine is bigger than yours kind of scenario, which people feel is not needed. For example, there are people who felt an opportunity was lost here today because Nigeria kept harping on this issue, when in fact these parliamentarians could have heard something about what Nigeria is doing to deal with the Boko Haram issue, which remains an issue not only for Nigeria, but for everybody else on the continent. And that opportunity was lost, some people say, primarily because Nigeria was so obsessed with showing up South Africa. What do you say to that?
I think you missed the point. No, there's no rivalry between Nigeria and South Africa. Nigeria and South Africa remain shining examples to the rest of the continent and indeed the rest of the world. Those two countries represent the biggest hope of the black man, of the African. There's no rivalry. Those two countries are the biggest economies in Africa. These two countries represent the two of the biggest 20 economies in the world. No, it's not that. I mean, this is an issue that came up that touched a nerve of every human being, and it is being addressed as such. Please, let's not deviate from that. Boko Haram issue, yes. Boko Haram issue, even South Africa is there helping us. Because it's not an issue that is Nigerian. It's an issue that is human.
Well, definitely. That's exactly what is the point that many people are making. That the kind of energy that and time that you devoted to the other issues you're raising is actually the kind of energy that is expected of Nigeria, that we expect Nigeria to devote as much energy in every platform that it gets.
You missed the point. You missed the point. We've given every bit of sinew in our body, in our soul, in our armament. We've given it to defeating Boko Haram, and Boko Haram is going down. Boko Haram doesn't occupy the headline it was occupying a few months ago, is it? It's because this energy, which has been found in a cooperative manner, not only Nigerian, but indeed African, indeed international, cooperation, sharing of intelligence. We have rooted them out. They're no more the force they were a few months ago. They've been driven out of their safe haven of the Sambisa forest. Every energy. Please, I'll implore you, do not make your audience think there's a rivalry. There's no rivalry. The only thing we have is the only thing we have is the common thing between us, that is every other thing that's between every other two countries, being neighbors, being Africans, and being our brother's keeper. We've been our brother's keeper. Nigeria has been her brother's keeper over the years. Nigeria would not change from being her brother's keeper. And we are happy with the role South Africa is playing amongst the Committee of Nations, the new South Africa. But we say this, we're not no amount of energy is too much to cry against, to raise against man's inhumanity to man. Except if that's what you're saying.
No,
is that a dissipation of energy?
And I've tried, as far as I could, to make that distinction very clear. To say the issue is not for you not to raise the issues that you raised today. There is nothing, absolutely nothing wrong with that. But the issue was you devoting almost the entire time that you had, every energy that you've got, to really deal with one issue, when in fact a lot of people did expect you to share some insights into what is being done to make sure that the Boko Haram problem is really dealt with, and if you need more assistance, that's what needs to be done.
Thank you very much. I think you either not fully informed, or you truly may want to change what the real situation is. I had 2 minutes. I had 2 minutes like every other MP on the floor, and my first 1 minute 20 seconds, I was timed, was on Boko Haram. My remaining 40 seconds was on the xenophobic situation that is continuing in another form. So 1 minute, 20 seconds, which is 80 seconds on Boko Haram issue, and 40 seconds, and the records are there. So I don't think you're right, and I'm sure you are as pained as I am, both on the Boko Haram issue, because young girls were captured.
Yes.
Young girls have not been found guilty. Yes. Simply because you're human.
True that.
Not because you're Nigerian, simply because you're human. A member of humanity, members, over 200 of them, not been seen. Their families know where not they are. That touches you, that touches me, touches everybody. So also victims of xenophobia. So, I mean, we're on the same page. It's not about Nigeria and South Africa. South Africa remains one of our best friends, one of our biggest trading partners. We continue to host a good number of South African businesses. They post their best returns anywhere in the world in Nigeria, and we're good to them. Our laws are very good to them. We allow them to take away what they make and bring it, return it back home, invest it back here. In turn, we get some benefits out of it. We have, a mutually benefiting thing going on. There's no rivalry, but I tell you, I will not cease, neither will I stop talking about xenophobia until it's gone. Neither will I stop talking about Boko Haram issue until every single person has been accounted for and every single radical bandit has been either arrested or done away with. I will not, and Nigeria is not going to. We're not going to lose our voice because of any accusation of rivalry. There is absolutely no rivalry, and I'm happy to let you know, and indeed your audience, that the president of South Africa, President Jacob Zuma, is going to be our guest next week during the inauguration of the new president, and he's coming with a very good delegation. How else can you describe friendship amongst nations when two leaders are always there for each other?
Well, Senator, let's hope it continues that way, if even better, that it gets better.
We pray it deepens, and we pray it gets, we get a better cooperation and understanding of each other. We don't want issues swept under the carpet. We just want issues to be raised, addressed, and done with.
Thank you very much, Ambassador.
Yo, ladies, newsflash! Did you know that in every South African election over the past 20 years, women have outnumbered men in voting? How cool is that? Big up, ladies. You rock. So get registered and keep the girl power going.
Well, the AU was also criticized in the Pan-African Parliament today for failing to take action against President Pierre Nkurunziza. Burundi dominated the debate on peace security on the continent at that parliament. The country was plunged into crisis after President Nkurunziza announced that he will run for a third term. The president of the Pan-African Parliament also called on Burundian leaders to respect the country's constitution.
The problem is not that we are not all aware of what the issues are. The problem is that we have not put in place mechanisms that can go to the root causes of these problems and deal with them. The problem is that as leaders on our continent, we have continued to sometimes play the ostrich, hiding our head in the sand and hoping that our bodies will not be seen. Your Excellency, honorable colleagues, the situation in Burundi is clear. The constitution is clear. And we are asking the leaders in Burundi to respect the very constitution that has brought them to power. We're asking the leaders in Burundi to take responsibility for the lives and properties of citizens of that country. Burundi's hard-won peace should not, for any reason, be sacrificed on the altar of political issues. We believe that the people of Burundi need to come together and work towards peace in an atmosphere that is not devoid of any level of militarization.
President of the Pan-African Parliament not mincing his words. Well, the SABC's foreign editor, Sophie Mukwena, caught up with Burundi's MP at the Pan-African Parliament. She began by asking him what needed to happen for his country to return to stability.
There is many mission, especially high-level mission of African Union, who is in Burundi. Now they are discussing on the whole position in order to find a solution in to continue the democracy in Burundi. And we hope that this mission will do with all the other parties to a good decision for ameliorating the situation in Burundi.
But people are saying President Nkurunziza shouldn't contest elections must be postponed. Will that happen? Will that be a solution?
We must be sensitive to both positions, but we have to take enough time to discuss and to find a good solution in order to do the election which is peaceful.
The attempted coup, was there an attempted coup or it was just a misunderstanding?
First of all, I would like to condemn the coup in Africa because coup is not good to the democratic system. We have to take all positions, all parties in order to find a good consensus without violence and other wrong thing or bad thing to the population.
The AU at the team, is the team in Burundi right now?
Yes, the team is in Burundi right now because the AU have sent it, there is few days in Burundi, a high-level mission of AU in Burundi.
Well, Burundi President Pierre Nkurunziza, not the only one, of course, under attack for clinging to power. Other leaders also are doing it or have done it in the past. That tendency did come under heavy criticism at today's Pan-African Parliament debate.
Africa has had an ingrained and perennial system of failed leadership. Because leadership, being a functional word, has a responsibility of providing clear direction within which her people should be guided. Unfortunately, our leaders have failed to manage the natural resources of our continent with which we be endowed by God, and people in the midst of material prosperity live in a state of abject poverty. And so the Western imperialists, they make use of that opportunity to foster their ideology. Give them guns and they will kill themselves. We talk about the issue of Boko Haram in Nigeria. It is not the white man that coming himself to come and execute the cruelty against our people. They gave guns to our own brothers and sisters. In South Africa here, it is blacks that are killing blacks. So when African leaders rise up to the urgency of the movement, and they realize that by allowing the Western imperialist system to give us guns, that will cause our women to run in butchers with suckling mothers, seeing baby lying on their chest and die, all because we want to perpetuate ourselves in power at the disadvantage of the great majority of our people, then this issue of poverty will cease in Africa and we can have peace. Let us be mindful that holding a system of democratic election repeatedly in our country will ensure that we can have peace on the continent of Africa. No, we cannot have peace as long as there is ingrained injustice on our continent, where the vast majority of our people, including women and children, live in a state of abject poverty and neglect. We cannot have peace on our continent. And so we must learn to work together in a state of interdependence, sharing commonwealth, being our brother's keeper as Africans on this continent.
Mr. Speaker, honorable members, what I want to zero in on is the effect of conflict in Africa, particularly on women and children. Because during conflict, it is women and children that are caught between all the warring factions. As a result, they suffer discrimination, they suffer rape, abuse, and all types of inhuman treatment. That was why in 2000, the UN Security Council Resolution 1325 was adopted. It is now 15 years since the adoption of that Security Council resolution. This year in America, women gathered to review the progress that has been made, both for the Beijing 20 and also the UN resolution 15 years ago. What came out of that assessment is that despite the fact that achievements have been made, we still have a long way to go. Countries are yet to start putting in place national action points for the implementation of Resolution 1325. 1325 calls for the protection of women during conflict.
First and foremost, let me say that peace can only be born and be sustained through the preservation of institutional integrity. Africa and Africa's problems lies with people's representatives. It lies with us here. People's representatives, members of parliament, that are eroding governance, institutions, and integrity of our institutions to allow a big man, big woman syndrome to take root in Africa. For as long as people's representatives and people's parliamentarians, legislators, are abiding by political party, suppressive political party rules that says allow one man to remain in power forever and it is okay. For as long as if African legislators are silent and mum over the issue of governance, peace cannot be preserved. on our continent. If you look at what has happened in Nigeria, and I want to congratulate the people of Nigeria for what they have done in the last election, and something so unseen in many African countries, for an incumbent sitting head of state calling and congratulating a former adversary and giving him power freely and democratically. Had that not happened, had that call from President Goodluck Jonathan not happened in Nigeria, Nigeria would have been in a political crisis. It all has to do with us as representatives of the people to make sure that we do not erode governance. What is happening in Burundi and in many other countries is that we want to bend the rules, leave the institution for the men to preserve over institutions. And for as long as we do not preserve the integrity of our institutions, Africa would be at instability with itself. Thank you very much.
Well, I did, of course, catch up with Mr. Venani, just to get him to expand on some of the views that you saw him express there. And here's how our conversation went. Okay, it looks like we have a problem with that clip. We'll hopefully get back to it. Well, the MPs at the Pan-African Parliament weren't only critical about the continent's peace and security in Africa, they also praised those nations that where power was transferred through democratic elections.
Advanced, and that in Africa we are carrying out democratic elections in many African countries. And I wish to state that in Nigeria, and Tunisia, and Burkina Faso, and in 2015 and 2016 will be years in which there will be important elections in almost 50 African countries. So that is why I say that this is encouraging and proves clearly that we are consolidating democracy and that we are advancing to a better future. And with the elections, we will have more justice in Africa, more prosperity and equality, and more peace in Africa. This is important. I also wish to congratulate the signing of the peace agreement in Mali between Azawad and the government of Mali, and congratulate at the same time our brothers and sisters of Algeria, since they have been able to create and have created the necessary conditions to the signing of this agreement of peace and reconciliation, and I wish that will be sustainable. It is also encouraging to know that after the epidemic of Ebola in Africa, we have challenged this epidemic, and we have gone through the worst moments, and now we are seeing better conditions. In addition to all of the efforts, I'd like to thank all of the efforts of all of the African institutions, everything that has been done by the whole world, but in particular, I wish to thank from the Pan-African Parliament the solidarity and initiatives by the government of Cuba. I wish to thank what the government of Cuba has done during the history of the African people and its unconditional solidarity towards Africa. But as all my colleagues have stated previously, it hurts that in a report on peace in Africa, the situation and problem of Western Sahara does not appear from the beginning, and this problem cannot be forgotten. It should be amongst the first lines of this report, since it is an extremely grave situation of an entire people that have been exposed to more than 40 years in occupied territories, confronting torture, prison, and I do believe that this should be amongst the first priorities of this report. I do hope that we will all unite in terms of also, as soon as possible, to speak about a prosperous Africa, peaceful Africa.
While I appreciate progress made in bringing peace in many parts of our continent, and they've been mentioned, I really am against terrorism, human trafficking of women and children, the high rate of our people dying in those overloaded boats because they're looking for greener pastures. With Burundi, I would say, what history are we trying to write about our continent, Africa? Thousands of children are left to die of hunger. They are orphans. They have no proper housing. The women are running around looking for something to feed those children. And yet our continent is still not recognizing the power of women. Let's try and eradicate the greed of power. And let's try and recognize those women who have sacrificed for decades to be in the forefront of this conflict.
Well, that's where we are going to end it for this evening. But don't forget to join us again tomorrow when we'll be bringing you that all-important debate to be led by former President Thabo Mbeki on illicit outflows from our continent, a practice that has seen Africa losing billions and billions of US dollars every year. So till we meet again then, good night.